Hey everybody, how's it going? Doing audio only today because I feel like it. I kind of prefer doing audio only more. I don't know why, it's more like a radio show or a podcast or something, but I know that people don't really like that, so I'm sure not a lot of people will watch this video because there's not things to look at really, but oh well. Put it on while you're cleaning your house or something. I'm just going to tell you quickly about some of the things I watched lately. Most of them are true crime, kind of going off that other video I was doing, but I'm going to do these a lot quicker because there's a couple more, and to be honest with you, some of these I watched a couple weeks ago, so while I obviously remember what happened, I, kind of forgot some of the, players involved, names and things like that. So I don't think I'll be as in depth with it or anything like that. But yeah, so I'm going to start with. Also, by the way, before I get going, I just got a new mic, so let me know how that audio quality is. I hope it's a little bit better than usual. Anyways, I watched one called The Undercurrent, The Disappearance of Kim Wall, which was on HBO, and it was a pretty interesting one. It was a two-parter, I think, which, I tend to prefer the shorter ones. Um, and it was about this journalist named Kim Wall, who was this woman who got into investigative journalism, and she was apparently really, really good. She was like kind of almost in some ways like a cult journalist, not cult as in the bad kind, as in like a sleeper kind of journalist. She was, not super, super well known, but to the people she was known to, she was an outstanding investigative journalist who had a knack for it and often picked things that most people wouldn't normally pick. And she picked this Danish guy who I can't remember what his name is, so that's, I'm like I was saying, I forgot some of this stuff, but just as a basic summary, who was basically like a local hero, and he was like did all sorts of wacky, crazy inventions and everything, and he made a submarine. So she agreed to go interview him and go down on the submarine, and they recorded them going down and everything. Well, then he shows back up and she's gone. Where'd she go? And then he changes his story a million times. Well, yeah, you're gonna find out what happens by watching it, but it was pretty interesting. It wasn't. It was pretty gruesome crime, I will say that. But it wasn't shocking in the way like a lot of these have ridiculous twists and turns that you never see coming. This one, you kind of know like what's going to happen from the get-go, but it was kind of still an interesting little kind of piece anyways, so I enjoyed it. Next, I just wanted to say I did finish The Vow. I mentioned that I was almost about done with that one. Another HBO documentary on the Nixium cult. I didn't really have any more to say. I just wanted to say I did finish it, and it was excellent, so I highly recommend that one. Next was one called Killer Inside the Mind of Aaron Hernandez. This was on Netflix, and I think this was like 3 episodes or 4 episodes, another shorter one. Maybe it was 5, actually, to be honest with you, but I'm all over the place. This one was really fascinating, and I had heard a little bit about this, but didn't really know anything. Aaron Hernandez was a star football player in the NFL who killed a couple people. He was charged formally with killing one person, but you kind of knew he probably did kill 2 other people. And it was just a very bizarre story. His whole, he had kind of a tragic backstory, which kind of you're going to learn some things throughout this that kind of do start to explain why he did the things he did, but it doesn't, of course, excuse them. And some of his behavior is just so unbelievably bizarre. Some of the things that this guy did. It's just a really kind of weird one about, what went on with this guy. So, yeah, it wasn't like as good as some of the other ones I've seen, but it was definitely worth watching. I wouldn't say it was mediocre. It was a good one. I recommend it. Next is another one on HBO called, excuse me, I think I said that one's on Netflix. Not a HBO for the next one. I think this one was actually on Paramount Plus, and this was called Outcry, and this was about another football player, but a high school football player who was a very determined student and student athlete who, by everybody's account, was one of those special people that is above and beyond most kids of his age. Really determined and putting in a lot of hard work to become a football player. And he gets accused of raping several small children, and I mean really small. So this one definitely has some disturbing content matter. It's one of the more disturbing ones I've seen. But it was really fascinating. I frankly can't give any more away than that, or it will kind of ruin the whole thing. Um, Despite the very disturbing subject matter, if you can get past that, it was an extremely interesting documentary. I really highly recommend it. The next one was called I Love You Now Die. I think this was also HBO. This one was also really fascinating and just really bizarre, and it was similar to the Aaron Fernandez one, where it really showed you many different sides to this whole thing. And the basic gist of this one was this couple, this like teenage couple that only texted. They never, they weren't like a real life boyfriend girlfriend. They just were girlfriend boyfriend over like the internet basically. And she basically convinced him to kill himself. It goes way deeper than that. But this is another one, like I was saying, how it's going to show you kind of what led to this and why these people did what they did, but it doesn't excuse it. And there's always something deeper and darker lurking within these people that is really unsettling. So that was really interesting. The next one was called The Girl in the Picture. I put this on here because I remember watching it, but I got to be honest with you, it was like 2 months ago that I watched this. So I don't have a lot to say about this one other than it was pretty good. It was an interesting time waster. It's worth a watch if you like this stuff. It's a quick one. It's one whole thing, like one video. The next two are actually films, not true crime. Much more lighthearted, and they were two Tom Hanks movies that I've never seen. Kind of been on a Tom Hanks kick a little bit with movies. Actually, there's three Tom Hanks films. I'll just do the first one, which was Sully, which was about the landing of the plane in the Hudson. This was directed by Clint Eastwood. And I like Clint Eastwood. I think he's a good director. I think his movies are so stylistically like Eastwood, you know what I mean? He makes solid movies for the masses that try to say a little bit more than your standard popcorn blockbuster kind of flick. So I don't ever think, like, this might be heresy because I know like people absolutely love Eastwood's movies, but a lot of Eastwood's movies I just think are fine. I don't think that they're like magnificent, epic films, but there's not a lot to complain about, you know what I mean? And I think he does that very, very well. And that's how I would describe Sully. It was very well done. It was an interesting story, but there wasn't a lot to it. It was kind of done and over with. That's how I would describe it, but I enjoyed it. Next one I really enjoyed a lot, and it was That Thing You Do, which I think came out in 1996. Tom Hanks wrote and directed this. And this is a pretty simple story as well about, one-hit wonders, basically about a band that gets a one-hit wonder and all that they go through with that. Kind of life on the road, that kind of story. Stuff that's been done before, but it was done really well. It was extremely funny. The song was really catchy. The whole thing was just, it was lighthearted. It was an easy watch. It was really, really well done, though. I've never seen a Tom Hanks directed or written thing, actually, and he's really good at doing that. It was the one thing I noticed about the film. It felt like, this movie's not trying to be anything more than what it is, but it's directed and shot. The whole film as a whole is of higher quality than most films that come out this day, in age, is how I would picture that, or how I would put that movie. So I really enjoyed that film a lot. I watched the director's cut too, which was like 2.5 hours, but yeah, it didn't feel long in the tooth at all. I felt just perfect. And then the last one I actually watched yesterday, another Tom Hanks one, called Joe versus the Volcano. I don't know if this is, like, I'd never heard of this movie, never heard of it. I knew it was Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, so I thought it was going to be like, an 80s rom-com, which it kind of is, but it was way, way more than that, way different. It was a really interesting film. It's basically about this guy named Joe who finds out that he has a terminal illness, so a company contacts him and hires him to travel to an island and jump into a volcano and sacrifice himself to stop the evil god of this volcano from killing the island. And they figure you're gonna die anyways. Let's give you some money up front and do it. That sounds wacky because it is. This movie is super, super wacky, oddball, not placed in reality at all. It takes place mostly in Manhattan, like in New York City, but it is not remotely based in reality. It's a fantasy kind of film, which I wasn't expecting. Was really cool. I think that there's not a lot of cool fantasy films these days that aren't like Norse mythology kind of stuff, like the Game of Thrones style thing where it's super serious all the time. I like to see more lighthearted fairy tale esque sort of adventure movies, um, stuff like that. So, it was cool in that aspect. It was one of the more stylized movies I've ever seen, and for the first like 20 to 30 minutes of this movie, I thought that this was like some insane epic movie that I have never heard of somehow, or it was like this huge cult movie that I've never heard of, because the beginning of this, the art style, it takes place in this like post-apocalyptic almost sort of New York City where everything is like gray, and he works at this terrible job, and the set design is like so exaggerated, like Tim Burton almost sort of forced perspective of things, and everything looks fake like a set, and the color palette is so extreme. I mean, it is way, 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 way more like fantastical than as an average movie set. And the color palette also was crazy. At times, it reminded me of how extreme Dick Tracy's color palette was, where that movie was so stylized color from a color palette standpoint. This kind of felt like that too, but even better, honestly. There were just some shots in the beginning that were just gorgeous. Like and it was also a very artistic style movie. There was this beautiful, there's cool music sequences with very little dialogue, and there were shots of Tom Hanks's character Joe walking around, or driving away from this building that was so slow paced. It actually felt to me at times in the beginning like Paul Thomas Anderson style, and maybe that's what that they were going for, mixed with Tim Burton's styles of set design, kind of mixed with the weirdness of David Lynch, because the beginning was very odd and had some slow, like I said, very little dialogue, odd characters. It did feel Lynchian a little bit. And then the movie just kind of changes. It never loses that fantastical, not based in reality kind of thing. It always has cool colors and visuals, but it goes from being that kind of strange, artsy sort of film that I was really, really liking to a kids movie, which I think this is ultimately a family-friendly adventure romance movie. I really do. I mean, it's a PG film, so it's definitely suitable for the whole family, and that's what it ends up feeling like, which is fine. Not every movie I watch needs to be an R-rated film. PG movies are fine. But PG movies don't have to be, just for kids. I say family movie, but this is intended, I think, to be viewed, with the whole family. Not just like two adults are going to watch a movie. Like The Majestic is a PG movie that has adult situations and profanity in it, but it doesn't really warrant a PG-13 rating. So yeah, it goes by pretty quickly, like his travels. A lot of the movie is setting up everything to him, being dead end in life, and then getting this renewal on life when he gets all this money. And then you get this whole sequence of him going out and going on a shopping spree, which feels like Home Alone, kids stuff. And then him traveling to the island with Meg Ryan, who plays a couple different characters in this movie. She was fine in this movie. Meg Ryan's not really a great actress, but it was completely fine in this movie. She was pretty funny, actually. But it just feels like a family-friendly thing, and it just goes quick. Then you get to the island, and the whole thing is over before you can blink. There's a cool sequence. There's a cool sequence where they're floating in the water. Some adventure moments here, but once they get to the island, it's like at the end of the movie, and it just boom, it's over with. And of course, they fall in love and blah blah blah. So, that was weird. It just felt like such a distinct style change. And also, once they get to the island, it gets so over the top goofy with the humor. It feels almost like a Mel Brooks movie for kids, like that very almost like Airplane style humor, where it's like a parody film. It's super satirical. It's really hokey and goofy, and corny, but it was still kind of funny. Just the people that like Abe Vigoda was in this and stuff like that. It was really funny, but it was so over the top, like goofy. So this movie had very distinct styles, um, and I just don't think it worked. I mean, it was a very cool film, and I'm glad I saw it because it was totally unique and not like anything I've seen lately or in a long time, and it was totally unexpected. But I'm not gonna own this. When I was first watching this, I was like, oh, I have to get this on Blu-ray. No, I have no need to own this movie. I'll watch it again in a couple of years. It's worth watching again maybe, but not for a very long time. You know what I mean? Or if I want to show someone a really unique film that they may or may not have seen, then I would show them this or something like that. But it was just odd because I don't think that kids are going to get the opening with what they're dealing with or the weirdness. And even adults who would probably understand the themes in this movie at the beginning, especially, are going to, maybe a lot of people find it too strange with that Lynchian aspect in the beginning, or too artsy with some of the Paul Thomas Anderson influences. And then later on, it's like not going to be serious enough for someone who is expecting that sort of style to continue. So that was an incredibly long-winded rant on this movie, but I did think it needed the most time to talk about because it was the one freshest in my brain, and it was such an incredibly unique film. I wouldn't really give it higher than a 3 out of 5 because everything in it was extremely predictable and mediocre. There was some funny humor, but again, it felt misplaced at times, and then there was, unbelievable set design and color and cinematography for a generous portion of the movie, but then it just kind of turned into, fantastical set elements I would expect from, a family-friendly 90s movie. So yeah, I don't know about that one. It was an interesting one, for sure. I'm at least glad I saw it. That was everything. Yeah, that's it. Peace out. Have a